I'm national correspondent Kayla Gaskins on Capitol Hill. The longest government shutdown in history could end this week because the Senate has a compromise plan with enough support to pass. A breakthrough on Capitol Hill.
The American people have suffered for long enough.
After a 40-day stalemate, enough Democrats crossed the aisle Sunday and joined Republicans.
The motion upon reconsideration is agreed to,
giving Senate leaders the votes they needed to advance a compromise package to reopen the government.
They decided to put principle over their personal politics.
The agreement will fund multiple agencies for the full fiscal year and all other agencies until January 30th of 2026. In exchange, Democrats have the commitment from the White House to rehire federal workers fired at the start of the shutdown and a promise to vote on extending the expiring Affordable Care Act tax credits.
You know, I've got some folks who didn't like the vote, but I'm going to have a whole lot of federal employees who are going back to work and they're getting their paychecks.
8 senators broke rank in the Democratic caucus to advance the compromise. 2 Democrats and 1 independent supported the GOP plan since the beginning of the shutdown. And on Sunday, 5 more Democrats joined. None of these lawmakers are up for re-election next year, but amid intense backlash, they are being accused by many Democrats of caving to President Trump and Republicans. Maine Senator Angus said Democrats' tactics weren't working and weren't ever going to work.
The problem was after over 40 days, neither of those goals was being accomplished. And in the meantime, a lot of collateral damage was happening. People's lives were being hurt. We've heard you talk about air travel, but I'm more worried about 42 million Americans who depend on SNAP benefits to put food in before their families.
Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer standing firm in his opposition.
I cannot support the Republican bill that's on the floor because it fails to do anything of substance to fix America's health care crisis.
The government won't reopen until the House also passes the compromise plan and President Trump signs it. On Monday, Speaker Mike Johnson gave House members 36 hours to return to Washington and prepare for a vote. On Capitol Hill, I'm Kayla Gaskins.
The historic shutdown could be over as it enters its 41st day. Yesterday, 8 Democrats broke with Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer in a sign that they were willing to compromise to try to reopen the government while those negotiations do continue. And joining us now to discuss this and more headlines on the Hill is our Washington insider, Armstrong Williams. Good morning to you, sir. You know, you called it and said we would soon see the government reopen with enough Senate Democrats to agree on some kind of a CR. Tell us what's happening on the Hill right now.
Well, listen, the sort of bypass these greedy insurance carriers to get the money directly to the consumer, the fact that everybody who's fired, federal employees, will get their jobs back, and everyone will get their paycheck and also their past benefits. And you cannot consider firing any other federal employees until January 31st. That was enough for Democrats. And also Chuck Schumer, believe it or not, needed a lifeline. He had to hold for the progressives that he's beholden to, but behind closed doors, Dick Durbin, voting with the centrists, indicated they were ready to move on and stop hurting people for right now for no reasons necessary, because they won the elections on last Tuesday. And so it's just time to resolve this and move on to real issues and issues that this shutdown has caused.
What does this mean, though, ultimately for Chuck Schumer? Clearly the Democratic Party not falling in line behind him anymore. What changed?
Common sense and people yelling at him. You know, there's a possibility, there are rumors that this could be his last hurrah that he may, as Nancy Pelosi did, announce his retirement.
Yeah, we keep hearing that too. And I got to ask you about this story that kind of popped up over the weekend, an unverified story, by the way, about the January 6th pipe bomber who placed pipe bombs outside the offices of the Republican National Committee and the Democratic National Committee. Everyone saw this video. We've seen this video for almost 5 years now. This happened just before the events of January 6th. And again, nearly 5 years later, there is still no suspect in custody, Armstrong. The FBI, the DOJ had no problem quickly finding those January 6th suspects who entered the Capitol. Why do you think there has not been an arrest yet on this?
It's very sensitive. And the fact that the DOJ and the FBI has not given any credibility to this, they have not also said, they've not declared that it was not true. There's many things that the story has gotten wrong. There are a few things that the story has gotten right. They want to make sure before they make any announcements on this, because not only does it involve Capitol Police, it involves the CIA, the FBI. They want to make sure
Potentially,
they dot all their I's and cross all their T's. It's just that sensitive.
You're inside the U.S. Capitol building right now. What does it say, though, about the security of our nation's capital when someone could do this, you know, plant pipe bombs, obviously meant to cause death and destruction, and get away with it now for what's almost been 5 years?
You're assuming that the bomb was planted to detonate. Not considering that it may have been a ploy to further malign the right-wing extremists as if they planted the bomb.
Interesting.
It was never intended. You just got to think deeply about this.
Okay. And
Yes, yeah.
And by the way, very quickly, looking back at Election Day, we know places like New York and New Jersey are not a bellwether for the midterms for the rest of the country. But what were some of your biggest takeaways?
Is that the Democrats held on to their blue states that Trump never won before. And in some of them, they barely held on. And also in Minnesota and Minneapolis, the radical Somalian extremist who has been for mayor lost, which tells you that Minnesota has not lost all its common sense. They still put America first. And that was a good sign. And so, you know, we move on. These elections are elections, and anything within a week can change the dynamics of it. The voters are very fickle. We'll just see what happens. The midterm elections, Jeanne, is a long way off. Anything can happen.
That's very true. All right, sir. Washington insider Armstrong Williams. Great to see you there inside the Capitol. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Confusion and uncertainty has been mounting for 42 million Americans who rely on SNAP benefits. Just this morning, a federal appeals court ruled SNAP benefits must be paid in full in November of 2025. KOMO's Natalie Fahmy explains why and how we got here.
It has been a windy road these past 10 days as the battle to fully fund SNAP or not in the month of November has played out in courts across the country.
I'm angry. I'm very angry.
SNAP recipients in Washington state, like Georgia Gillespie, are more than frustrated.
It's really tough. It's very tough to not have control of your own survival.
She hasn't received her benefits this month and says now she's needing to make difficult decisions to keep food on the table. But how did we get here? On October 1st, the federal government shut down, with SNAP payments poised to stop on November 1st. On October 31st, a federal judge ruled payments must continue in full even during the shutdown. The Trump administration appealed the ruling on November 7th. And after a winding road of appeals and Supreme Court involvement, on November 10th, a federal appeals court rejected the Trump administration's effort to only partially fund SNAP benefits until the shutdown ends.
We rely on our government to take care of our communities and neighbors, and they're not doing it. They're not doing their jobs. So.
And the whole up and down of it all has some Seattle residents like Dave Redile frustrated. He says lawmakers in D.C. should have never let the shutdown get to this point.
They need to figure it out.
And even with positive signs from the Capitol that the shutdown could end soon, he's not confident that things will bounce right back to normal.
I think there'll be a lot of impacts. They'll continue.
In Washington state, Governor Bob Ferguson did announce that 250,000 households did receive their SNAP benefits. That is about half the number of households in the state that rely on the benefit. In Seattle, I'm Natalie Fahmy, KOMO News.